So there comes a time in every youth pastor's life when he's going to ask his boss a very serious question. And I was thinking to myself, what's that question I got to ask my boss? And then it came to me. I had to go to Pastor Jay and I had to ask him, do you love me?
Hello? Daphne? Yeah, no, I don't know how it went. This is incredibly awkward.
If I were to ask you who the most famous of the disciples were, what would be your answer? Now, most people would say Peter, and that's because besides from Jesus, Peter's name is one of the most referenced names in the New Testament, especially amongst the disciples. And Peter is the central theme of this week's Good Question.
Peter's name is mentioned 191 times in its various forms, whereas the rest of the disciples combined equal out to be around 130. This means that 60% of the time a disciple is being mentioned, it's Peter. Now, if you were to take all the disciples' names, all 12 of them, and put them in a hat and pull them out at random, the chances of getting these odds are so infinitesimally small that there would be over 200 zeros in the decimal place before you reached your number. This means that it is impossible that Peter's name is mentioned this much by accident.
Now, not only is Peter's name referenced, but he has 2 letters attributed to his name. And Mark's gospel is believed that Mark was a scribe for Peter. And so Peter, or Simon as we're introduced to him as, grew up in the city of Bethsaida, a city which we reference in video 2 of our series. Now, Bethsaida was a small fishing village on the Sea of Galilee, and Peter, along with his brother Andrew, were fishermen by trade.
Andrew plays a key role in Peter coming to know Jesus. Andrew was one of John the Baptist's disciples, as we mentioned in video 1 of our series. Andrew left John the Baptist to follow Jesus, and after determining that Jesus was the Messiah, brings Peter to meet Jesus, which plays a central role in Peter's life.
Now, Peter, who at this time is still referred to as Simon, has this incredible conversation with Jesus. Jesus says, "You are Simon, you will be called Cephas." Now, Cephas is from Aramaic origins, meaning rock, and is derived from the Aramaic word Cephas, which means rock. Now, Cephas is a biblical name known for its connection to Peter, for the Greek word for rock is Petros.
Matthew 16 shows the Spirit's revelation within Peter, and through this we get an interesting contrast to what Jesus says in John chapter 1 and Matthew 16, where he said, "You will be, and now you are Peter," through this revelation. Because of this, Jesus blesses Peter and offers him the keys to the kingdom and says that on this rock, or on you, Peter, on this rock, I will build my church.
Now, we see the fulfillment of this prophecy in the book of Acts. On the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit is poured out on the believers, it is Peter who is the one who stands up and delivers this incredible message that leads to thousands of people believing in Jesus. Peter is the one who brings the gospel to the Samaritans. Peter is the one who brings the gospel to the Gentiles. It is Peter's the one who people saw as the leader of the church. They would come to him for wisdom and for guidance on what to do in the spreading of the gospel. Now, despite all of this, Peter wasn't without his own faults. And Paul, during his missionary journeys, actually confronts Peter and addresses some things to his face.
One of these faults that we see is Peter denying Jesus. Now, this comes right after Peter says that even if all the rest of these stumble, I will never stumble, which, when coming to our good question, is very interesting to look into, because Jesus' first question is, "Do you love me more than these?" referring to the other disciples. Now, Peter's denial happens 3 times that he denies Jesus before the rooster crows. And Jesus asks him 3 times in return, "Do you love me?" Now, when we look at the Greek for this passage, we see that the word used for love is not always the same. In fact, when Jesus starts, he uses the Greek word agape. Now, agape is a sacrificial love. Peter is actually unable to respond with, yes, I agape love you. Instead, he responds with the word philo, which is more of a friendship type of love. Jesus asks again if Peter agape loves him, and Peter again responds with, I philo love you. Then the third time that Jesus asks, do you philo love me? And Peter says, yes, you know that I philo love you.
Now, at the end of their conversation, Jesus prophesies over Peter, telling him how he was going to die. Now, in 64 AD, there's a bunch of fires in Rome, and Nero, who was the emperor at the time, blamed Christians for starting these fires, which started a mass persecution of Christians. Now, Peter, who was in Rome during this time, at the time of his death, was crucified. Now, scholars and historians believe that Peter wasn't crucified upright like Jesus was, but rather he was crucified upside down. And so Jesus prophesying that Peter will be a martyr, it's showing that Peter will one day have this agape love, this sacrificial love for Christ. Even though at the time that Jesus was having this conversation with Peter, he was unable to answer that question. And so we turn to our good question, do you love me? And we ask you, do you love Christ? And is your love for Christ a sacrificial love for him? And so we encourage you to pray and prepare your hearts of this question for Sunday morning.
What's the matter? Did he say he didn't love you?
It's not that. No. He asked me to do the meaningless task of taking out the trash. Anybody can do that.
There.
We got it.